Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We are here to present some of the work that the Market Accelerator for Green Construction program of IFC and the Government of the United Kingdom has done in the Africa region, and also to talk with some of our esteemed partners from the Green Building Councils in Ghana, Kenya, and the Green Building Summit in South Africa in a panel to discuss the more recent developments in the green building market in the three countries and in the region in general. My name is Sandro Diaz Amigo. I'm the research lead for the Market Accelerator for Green Construction program at IFC, which is part of the EDGE program, and again, sponsored by the Government of the United Kingdom. Again, welcome everyone, and I will start with a brief introduction to EDGE and IFC, and then I will continue with a brief overview of the UKIFC MAGIC research program. We will then have a brief overview of the market spotlights for green building in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa as an introduction to the panel discussion with Lisa Reynolds, CEO of GBC SA, Ted Otieno, the chairperson of the Kenya Green Building Society, and Cyril Ayete Tete, the founder of the Ghana Green Building Summit. So without further ado, for those who are maybe not familiar, IFC is a member of the World Bank Group. The International Finance Corporation is the sibling organization that works to provide solutions in private sector development. As part of this work, IFC supports green building growth with a four-part strategy. On the one hand, IFC provides investment and advisory for banks, and also investment and advisory for the building sector. In addition, it also provides support for the development of green building codes and incentives. And finally, IFC has also worked to create the EDGE certification, which provides a set of tools and scalable system to empower the property industry to go into green construction. My apologies for the technical difficulties. So in addition to the set of tools that EDGE provides, which are available for free, EDGE also sets standards that are achievable at its entry level. They require a 20% saving in energy, water, and materials, the embodied energy materials. And then if that level reaches 40%, EDGE Advanced is achievable. And then beyond that, EDGE has also launched the EDGE Net Zero standard. With this, a green label is achievable. In order to support this work, EDGE has set up a network of certification experts so that projects can be certified anywhere in the world. So far, more than 40 million square meters have been certified around the world, and almost 800,000 tons of CO2 equivalents have been saved every year. EDGE has grown exponentially, as we can see in this graph. Some countries have been leading in certain regions, and in particular in the Africa region, the certification has grown very rapidly in South Africa, but as we will discuss later, there has also been great advancements in other countries in the region. One of the countries that has deployed EDGE more rapidly has been Colombia, which has mainstream green buildings from virtually zero in 2017 to over 20% of new builds in 2021. That's of course not in the Africa region, but it's an example of how fast the green certification can grow. Within EDGE, the UK has provided funding for a partnership with IFC called the Market Accelerator for Green Construction, which is intended to provide blended finance, concessional finance if needed, to accelerate the expansion of certified green buildings in developing markets, mobilizing investment so that climate change can be mitigated. The MAGIC research program comprises three components. The green building market maturity snapshots, which we will discuss today briefly for Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, try to provide a snapshot, a view of where the market is at a given point in time. Then we have the stakeholder surveys. We have been working on one in South Africa and one in Colombia, and there are a few more in the pipeline. They try to get the perception from the different actors in the green building market regarding the motivations and obstacles that they are facing. And finally, the third component is the impact evaluation of EDGE certification buildings with the objective of assessing what is the impact of certification compared to non-certified buildings, for example, in terms of energy consumption based on usage. The first green building market maturity snapshots were timed to coincide with the launch of MAGIC in the region, and we will discuss them now. So I will be brief because this is just the base for the panel discussion, and this is a point in time view as of 2020. So the market has evolved rapidly in all the three countries I will discuss, and we will hear more about that in the panel discussion. So in 2020, when this snapshot was conducted, Ghana was classified as an early signs of transformation market with 1% market penetration of all three available green certifications in the country, with a majority of certifications focused on high-end commercial buildings. As of 2019, there was no significant green financing of buildings in Ghana, although there was some offer of energy efficiency loans. There was public sector policy being developed, of which more details are available here and on the individual snapshot, which we will make available. It's already published, but we will share the link to it after the seminar. And in terms of the country landscape, there was a large proportion of electricity consumed by the residential sector, almost half in 2020, a large housing deficit with a high incidence of informal housing construction. Mortgage debt was low as a proportion of overall household debt because it was not such a common instrument. And the construction market was mostly informal with a relatively low number of formal construction companies and developers. In contrast, Kenya was a bit farther along. It was classified as an early growth market in 2020 with larger market penetration, 3%. The same three green certifications were available. In this case, there was a focus of both office and high-income housing. There was some presence of real estate investment trust in the country, but not really an industry of green building construction loans or green mortgage products in the market yet. The green economy strategy was a bit more advanced as of 2020, had already been a few years, and new green fiscal incentives were being implemented in 2020. In terms of the country landscape, the consumption of electricity was also about half of the electricity generated in the country. There's a large demand and an undersupply of formal affordable housing. Housing finance was provided mostly by savings and credit cooperatives, and the market was dominated by local developers, although there was an initial influx of developers from abroad. And finally, for South Africa, this was the most developed market. It was classified as moderate developed market. Here, the market penetration of green certification, green building certification, was much higher, 30%. Again, the same three certifications. In this case, Green Star was the most commonly used, and the focus was again, as in Kenya, higher-end commercial offices and residential buildings, but as mentioned, with a much higher penetration, so a more, if not mature, more developed market. Green building finance was available, but typically limited to specific projects and developers instead of more off-the-shelf solutions more widely available. And there was an offer of climate finance loans from the three top banks in South Africa. The public sector policy framework was quite developed, with the South African National Standard setting the voluntary standard already from the late 2000s, and additional standards having been developed. In terms of the country landscape, apart from the consumption from the building sector, South Africa in particular has a large reliance on fossil fuels as of 2020, and that has continued to be one of the features of power generation in the country. Also, high levels of water stress, giving a lot of importance to energy and water efficiency in the building sector. The construction industry has a lot of micro, small, and medium enterprises, but also has some large developers, especially working in the large urban areas of Johannesburg and Cape Town. And as it's not uncommon in many of the countries that we have done this work, the financial sector has a high concentration, in particular when it comes to construction financing and mortgage financing. So with this, I conclude the presentation of the work that we did to provide a baseline for the state of the green building market in the three countries. And I would like now to invite my colleague, Dennis, to introduce our panelists and to discuss what have been the more recent developments in the market and how IFC and our partners are working to further develop the green building market in the region and in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa in particular. Thank you very much, Dennis. And thank you very much, our panelists, for being here. Our apologies. We might be having some technical issues. Dennis, we cannot hear you. Now we can see your screen, but we cannot hear you yet. Again, apologies to our audience. Dennis, maybe we'll give you like 30 seconds to maybe try to get the sound. Otherwise, I would be happy to maybe invite our panelists to speak.
Dennis, maybe just connect or maybe disconnect your headset.
Okay, just to jump in, maybe the panelists we can introduce ourselves. So I can ask the panelists to kindly turn on their webcams so that we can do a round of introductions as we wait for Dennis to bring his camera back on. Great, so Lisa, maybe you can start, and then Cyril, and then I'll introduce myself as well.
Okay, perfect. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you very well, Lisa.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Reynolds. I am CEO of the Green Building Council in South Africa. Thank you to IFC for this opportunity. So hand over to Cyril.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cyril Nia-Itetete. I'm the founder of Ghana Green Building Summit and also the executive director for EHM Property Consults, a boutique real estate firm in Accra, Ghana. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Cyril. Yeah, hi, my name is Ted Otieno, current chairperson at Kenya Green Building Society, and also the director at Industrial Support, which is an energy and renewable energy farm here in Nairobi. So I think, Dennis, I heard your voice, so you can take it from here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That was some technical issues. Okay, so great that we are able to get the introductions out of the way. And so I have just a few questions. Sandro, thanks so much for giving us an overview of what's happening in the three countries. Now we do have our partners who we've been working with and who are very much on the ground and understand what's happening on the ground. We want to just find out some more about what's happening. I mean, it's a very nice report, but then does it actually reflect on the ground? So I'll have just about 4 questions, and it would be for all the 3 panelists. Maybe we'll start with Lisa, and then basically, in your opinion, what are the key success factors in your country that you think may have resulted in the growth of the green building market? So it will be the same question to Cyril and then Ted as well.
Thanks, Dennis. That is quite a complex question, though, I must just tell you. So it's not easy. But I think the biggest part has been awareness. There's been definitely a push when we started in 2007 to where we are now. The conversations that we have, the awareness we have, and whether it be a combination of international signatories, or different accords, whether it be the reality of climate change really being on our doorstep, and we're seeing examples of it all the time. And I think it's also with the link between sustainability and finance. This sort of also looking at sustainable buildings as being future-proofed buildings and not sort of stranded assets and things like that. I think the conversation has really changed within our space. Not all the way to where we want it to be, but it's gone leaps and bounds. And I think that's been the biggest sort of change within this green space, building space in South Africa.
It's great. So we may then move on to Ted for Kenya on the same question. I mean, what do you think may have resulted in this growth in the market?
Thanks, Dennis. I agree with Lisa that this is a complex question. Sorry, just by the way, maybe as panelists we can mute our microphones when you're not speaking. I'm hearing some echo on my side. But yeah, so I think I agree with Lisa that this is a complex question, especially in our case where we only have, based on the report, 3% market penetration, right? So if we're looking at success factors for 3%, I mean, ideally as Kenya Green Building Society would like 100% market penetration. But what has contributed to the 3% has been advocacy. I think advocacy goes a long way. It builds over time, and as a society, we do understand that you don't see the impacts of advocacy right now and here, but it's long term, and I think that cannot be understated. That advocacy has gone a long way in terms of contributing to this change.
Interesting. What about Cyril, for you in Ghana? What do you think has caused this?
I think feeding off what Ted just said, for me, it will be advocacy and education. If I think about policy and regulation, I would say not so much, even though as we are still waiting for assent into law of our reviewed building regulations. When this is passed, they will have an entire section dedicated to green building regulations, which will stipulate that certain types of buildings, large real estate projects with floor space of 6,000 square meters or more in Ghana need to be built green. That policy has not, or that law has not been effected yet. So I think for me, the key driver has to be education. Also, that said, the Sekondi Takoradi Metropolitan Assembly is one of the few government institutions providing incentives in the form of 30% discount on permit fees. And I know it's baby steps, but because in a large scheme of capital costs, the permit fee really is a drop in the ocean. But it's still a feel-good incentive, and crucially for me, it keeps the awareness of green building, education, and advocacy very relevant. So if you ask me today, I would say the drivers of the officially captured growth, and I'm saying officially captured growth, and as we discuss this a bit more, I would expand on what I'm calling the officially captured growth. The drivers for me has been advocacy and education and the awareness creation. And kudos to the EDGE team for the visibility and the touch points and workshops offered to increase the awareness. I can testify from conversations and interactions that EDGE, and for that matter, Going Green dominates a lot of the conversations in the green and the real estate community in general. I can boldly say that it is the certification of choice now, considering the value the app offers and relatively manageable certification fees compared to other international standards. The next challenge really for me would be to move that into the mainstream conversations with everyday people. I mean, lots to do, but yeah, steady progress. And I think all of that is down to advocacy, education, and awareness creation. Thank you.
Great. That's very interesting and good to know. I would move on to my second question. I mean, it's also addressed to all three of you. So basically, the report that Sanjo just went through or shared, this was something that was done based on 2020 data, so just before COVID. And we know very well that the green building markets in your countries are developing very, very rapidly. Now, in which sectors do you think there has been more development in your country after the data that we used for this report was done? Where do you think has seen a lot more growth that we may not have accounted for in this report? And I think maybe Ted can start from this side in Kenya.
Yeah, Dennis, I think of course, from 2020, yes, I think the first aspect of developers, The market penetration, of course, hasn't changed much because you're looking at 2 years and you're looking post-COVID, where there's a slowdown. However, in the financial institutions, we've seen more financial institutions, like of Absa that now has certified their buildings. So financial institutions have already started taking up, the green building as part of what they're doing. We also have the ESG mandate that is required for all financial institutions. So ESG has become a key driver of the green building growth because green buildings are under E. So as investors are coming in, they're requesting for ESG from developers. So you're seeing more developers move towards, and of course, as Cyril has said, EDGE being sort of like a default in the market in terms of certification as a certification tool. Then you have under the public sector, you also have now green building guidelines for the counties, which is work that Kenya Green Building Society, for example, is doing. And in that, we're also working on setting, for example, MEPs, which is minimum energy performance for buildings. I think when we looked at the South Africa report under public sector, this is something that they have, and I think that has been missing, tying in energy efficiency as a policy to sort of catalyze the green building industry is something that has been missing in this market. And it's for example, working in South Africa, and probably also a good reason why their market penetration is much higher.
Wow, that's interesting. What has the situation been in South Africa, Lisa?
Well, Dennis, I must tell you, it's Ted said there's a slowdown in the market, which there was, but I must just say that 2021 was a record number of green building certifications in South Africa ever. It's the highest number of green certifications we've had was in 2021, which was such an uncertain year. And we didn't have a bad year in 2020 either, even with COVID. But I think, Ted, I would agree with you. The big push is the ESG, because I think the largest portion of our green certification is existing buildings. But it's good in that existing buildings, to me, is always a journey. You start and you understand where your building is now, and so you could start at a 2-star, and then I know most of the sort of property sector want to get to a 4-star, so they understand we're here now and this is where we want to go to, so that there's that sort of requirement for growth, and whether it be because let's approach net zero, or it's because we have to do an ESG report and you are the E of our ESG. That is, I think, where a lot of the growth has come from. There's also been a higher awareness on the residential side, and that's also EDGE certification. APSI has done the green loans. I think Nedbank's the green loans. There's quite a few banks that have started looking at these things, and I think facilitating this. And also, when we talk about future-proofing our buildings and that green buildings are future-proofed, we spoke about the health of buildings long before a pandemic hit, and suddenly the health of buildings went from this sort of nice to have to a need to have, because with the COVID, with pandemics, we have to have healthier buildings, and suddenly that conversation became top of mind. It had never been a top of mind. We always spoke about utilities, energy and water utilities, but suddenly that health aspect and that wellness of buildings came into the conversation. And I think that also helped promote a lot of the certification.
Yeah. So just before I go to Cyril, I just want to follow up on the statement you made that 2021 saw the highest certification in South Africa. I mean, it's quite interesting because that was still at the height of COVID.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a particular reason for investors now asking their projects to be certified, or was there something else?
I think it's investors asking for the projects to be certified, because if you look at it, when the economy is down, you have to think wisely of where you invest. And I think, we've often said the property sector is the right place to invest. But suddenly we've got this sort of economy that's not fantastic, and you say, well, if I'm going to invest even in the property sector, I'm now going to differentiate between just investing in the property sector and investing at the sort of the higher value, the higher performing buildings, because I know my money is safer there because this is a green asset, basically. But I do believe that's a big part of the conversation.
Yeah, great. Okay, so Cyril, what is the situation in Ghana like? I think you're on mute, Cyril.
All right. Okay. So for me, the sector that clearly has witnessed a lot more activity would be the commercial and the retail sector, as the numbers indicate in the report. Primarily, I think the driver has been that for most of these projects, they're owned by investors who are in tune with the benefits of green building, marketing-wise, as most tenants are now becoming very savvy, and sustainability ranks very high on their purchase decisions. And then also operational cost savings to be made, and even ESG requirements, as mentioned by my colleagues. Interestingly enough, as Lisa was just saying, that for SA 2021 witnessed the highest number of certification. There's a similar development in Ghana. I mean, it's not quite the same in terms of the volume and the quantum of the quantum leap, but for instance, in the past year, there has been a key development in the residential sector, and I think that's very interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the activity and the certifications has been within the commercial and the retail sector. There's a 3,000 plus housing units development by Rehoboth Properties. These are affordable housing units, and there's also the 100 units Lahagu affordable housing development in the north. The exciting thing about this particular development within the particular sector, the affordable housing sector, is that these developments clearly, apart from going a long way to reduce the housing deficit, which is 2 million plus, is a big statement that green buildings and EDGE certification, for that matter, is not an exclusive preserve of either just commercial spaces or high-end properties. So I think for me, these developments are quite key and very encouraging.
Great. All right, so my last set of questions would be, I mean, still to all panelists, what exactly have you seen, as in which of the various sectors, when we talk of the financial side, when we talk of the construction side, or the government incentives or regulations, where have you seen a lot of growth in? I mean, from the time the report was made, I mean, till now, where do you think has been the area that has really grown? Maybe we'll start from Lisa, sorry, because I know in South Africa, that's the most matured of all the markets that we've presented.
No, it's all good. I don't mind you picking on me, Dennis. So it's all good. Yeah, so I think it's, as I said, probably, well, South Africa's definitely been the commercial side, but there's been a lot of build up in the industrial buildings as well. And I think it's also a sign of the times, with people getting more deliveries, you know, shopping online and things like that. I think there's been a big push on industrial buildings as far as warehousing and things like that go. So I think there's been a push to, you know, try and get those buildings more into a sustainable place, into a greener space. And I think, yeah, so it's really, yeah, it's industrial, commercial, and then also residential. We found, you know, the government policies, there's a lot of good government policies out. There hasn't been that many government buildings being built or refurbished. So I think that side hasn't been really there. But just on our side, for the benefit of the listeners, 10400XA was version 2, or edition 2 was published in 2021. So, and that's now sort of up the minimum performances, so the legislated minimum performance has actually been improved. And there's also been the beginning of
is it just me, or we lost the connection from Lisa?
We might have indeed lost Lisa's sound.
Okay, so Lisa, we will have to come back to you later on. I hope you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. So let's maybe move on to Ted, and then later we come back to you, Lisa, after Ted, and then Cyril answer the same question. Okay, all right.
Thanks, Danny.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think for sure, and then in the financial sector, this has definitely grown, especially now, as I mentioned, with ESG being a mandate. And then also in the public sector, we've seen a lot of newcomers in the market doing affordable housing, because again, sustainable and affordable are intertwined. So there's no way you could have a affordable house that's not sustainable. However, I do think that there's a lot of data that would be missing in the report, and gaps as well as opportunities for future reports. So for example, because we're talking about buildings which are part of infrastructure projects, if you look at the recent infrastructure projects, for example, that have been done in Kenya, the SGR, BRT, the LRT, the expressway, they all embed fossil fuel-based transport modes. And this is ignoring the large amount of NMT, especially around, for example, the affordable housing deficit. So I think it's a critical consideration to also have, because sustainability measures will fall apart if the environment around the building is not sustainably planned. And this is where now it comes to other tools that, for example, that IFC is working on with Apex Cities that tie into the buildings. I think once we have those two come together, then we'll see even much more growth in terms of green buildings as a portion of the infrastructure projects that are coming up.
Great. What about Ghana, Cyril? Cyril, you're mute.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. There have been some developments in the finance sector. I mean, a lot of the banks have been slow to respond to the call for green mortgages, for example. And what happens with some of these other finance houses or investment houses is that some of these facilities may be given out, they may not necessarily be labeled green, but there's no concerted effort yet or facility yet that's been introduced that would say it's catering for green mortgages. On the other hand, there are some interesting financing schemes, especially with SunRev, who have signed agreements with CalBank and more recently even GCB Bank to support green projects with some facilities to be able to undertake such projects, energy efficient projects. So these are some of the developments, especially in the finance sector in Ghana here.
Okay, great. Maybe we go back to Lisa. Is the microphone better now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, you were making the very important point when we got disconnected. So, and if you could just reflect on it for us.
Which point? Where was I? I don't know.
So I think you were talking about the financing side, where you've seen a lot of growth.
Yes, yeah. So I think because of the different financial models, and again, I'm saying this, but it's not where it should be. I think it's still at sort of infancy, but it is giving some benefit, looking at the aspects of sort of eco loans and things like that into the residential side. It definitely is, doing it's showing some growth into it. And we, and I think the other comment I made was that just on the, I know it's not really on the subject, but on the sort of regulation side, that SANS 10400XA had edition 2 was published in 2021, which has now brought the minimal level up to a sort of a better performing as far as the energy goes, and that always pushes it up. And once that goes up, we also feel that we need to pull the green space a little bit further along. And then you heard my comments on industrial buildings. I assume that industrial buildings already showed the biggest growth.
Great to hear. So my other question would be, I mean, also to all the three panelists, what exactly do you see to the future of green building markets in the next 5 years? And what do you think, if you had to do another, I mean, if ISS is to do another market report, what is it going to reveal? Maybe we can start with Cyril from Ghana. It's the smallest market amongst the three. You're on mute again.
Muted. All right, there. Yeah. I was just saying smallest, but with great potential.
Actually.
Okay. So what do I see the future of the green building market in the next 5 years? So I'm seeing that policy and regulation would spur and also become a key driver of the uptake of green buildings. And as much as there are the policy being worked on, I mentioned earlier about the review of the building regulations, including green elements. Beyond the regulations and policy as well, there should be also, I see more fiscal incentives. I'm thinking tax holidays, and I know our government will be happy to hear the tax holiday, especially in these austere times. But I guess it's always the case of doing a cost benefits analysis to find out what would spare the uptake of green buildings in Ghana here. And I think one key area that I see in the next 5 years sparing the movement would be regulations and policy, a key driver. I'm also seeing that certifications would increase, and then even beyond certifications, I am foreseeing that there'll be more energy performance certificates or labeling, because the appetite is there, the demand is there, the desire has been sparked amongst discerning investors who have the appetite to go green. And you know that sometimes when we speak to the members of the community down here, some of them would confess and tell you that they've used the app to do their modeling and simulations, but haven't fully certified. I think once the confidence is growing and there are more flexible ways around the fees, I see certifications also going out. I see a churning out of more qualified green building professionals as workshops and trainings increase. I also see an increased green building pipeline. A lot of these banks and some financing schemes and investment houses will tell you that they are not bankable projects, but increasingly as we step up skills development, trainings to train those green champions within the SME sector to be able to package some of these proposals to the banks and to the finance and investment houses the way they are, so that they are bankable. I see the pipeline also increasing significantly. So off the top of my head, this is the outlook I see for the Ghana green building market.
Right. That sounds very interesting. It means that it's likely in the next 5 years we should see at least 20% of the market in Ghana being green. Right. That's nice. What about you, Ted, for Kenya? what do you see to be the future for the green building market? If we should do another report in 5 years, what do you think would be in that report for Kenya?
Yeah, I think I have to agree, like with Cyril as well. In 2022, so in 5 years, that's 2027, we'll have a new building code in place, and the building code applies not only to the formal but also the informal sector. And if you look at the building code that is currently being drafted, it has aspects of green buildings. And as Lisa has mentioned, I think sorry, your feedback on your side.
Sorry,
so I think for sure, with more professionals coming on board, more green building professionals accredited, there is more capacity for professionals to, green buildings is going to become mainstream. So I think the next report will be talking about, just the building market in Kenya. And I think, we are looking forward to having a shift in the tide where, you have more buildings being built green, because as I mentioned during the building code draft, I don't think there should be a difference between a building and a green building. I think if you're going to put up a building, you might as well do it sustainably or not put it up at all. So I think for sure that in the next 5 years, there's going to be a shift, and developers have started seeing that. Some of the retrofits that have been done even in the central business district, and developers are starting to see why they need to go green. The market is also demanding for it.
Interesting. And to Lisa, I mean, South Africa is always, I mean, as usual, it's doing very well, but where do you see it in the next 5 years? What can be done?
Dennis, you say we're doing well, but no, we can do way better than this. I believe that. So I think the next step for us is definitely the net zero conversations. We must go from just being green accredited, whether it be EDGE or Green Star, but to get and start having this net zero conversation. I mean, we have to do something about reduction of carbon. We have to hit our carbon reduction targets as a country, as a continent. Because as a continent, we are going to be the ones that are heavy hit by the climate change and by the increase in temperatures. So we really have to, and I think we have to take the conversation beyond. So looking at the next 5 years, one, we will have a South African taxonomy. So the way we speak will be the same way that the financial people will speak, and they'll understand exactly what green is. We'll be having the net zero conversation. We'll be having more conversation around the built environment as opposed to just buildings, because that's the other thing. One of you mentioned, I think, Cyril, you mentioned infrastructure. Huge work needs to be done on infrastructure. So I think, you say we're doing well, but I believe there's so much more work to be done, and that's where I want us to be having the net zero, whether it be net zero carbon or net zero water. Both of those conversations have to be mainstreamed in the built environment, and that's to say it. And also, huge focus on the creation of green jobs within the green economy.
Wow, that sounds interesting. I want to ask the presenter just to check if we have some questions from the audience. Francis, can you confirm if there are any questions from the audience?
Not at the moment, Dennis.
Okay, great. All right, so any last words from the panelists before I sum it up?
Can I jump in here? Sorry, Dennis, can I jump in here?
Sorry.
I think also Ted and Cyril probably being very modest, maybe, is that, as an African regional network, we're also doing a lot of work together. And as I say, I think there's also going to be strength in us looking at Africa as a whole, because I believe there's each country's got its uniqueness, whether it be a positive or a negative, but I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from each other. I mean, Kenya's the housing in Ghana looking at sort of mandating green housing, that all new affordable houses must be age rated. It's a huge step, you know, and we need sort of more of that. And I think we are working quite a bit together. And I believe a lot of the strength is when we learn lessons from each other. And I think so these kind of forums are vital to furthering the conversation. But we are regularly online with each other and chatting.
Okay, all right. So there is a question from the audience, just one question. I don't think it's directed to any of you, but let me just read it out and we provide an answer. So it says, is it possible to have commercial banks participate in this panel in future so that they can also shed more light on their reluctance to embrace green financing? It will be better to understand the challenges they perceive. And then the one asking the question says, I know a number of banks in Kenya are having green funds, but deploying them is not being felt in the markets. Well, I don't know if any of you would want to answer this question, but yes, we actually didn't invite any financial institution on this panel because it was just to analyze the markets, to see what's happened, and then to also discuss the reports that we had done. That's why, but then you would realize that in most of the panel discussions that we host, we always have a financial institution in there to talk about what's happening. Yeah, it would be great to hear from them why we are not seeing a lot more green financing. I don't know if any of you have an idea as to why you think we are not seeing a lot more green finance on the market from the banks. Any of you want to give a go?
Pick on one of us, Dennis.
Okay, so maybe I'll pick on you, Lisa.
Thanks. Now, I think again, as I said, it's also about understanding green. Banks, by their nature, are risk averse, okay, which is fine. It's good because then we know that they're looking after the money. But we have to get them to, and that's where I think certification plays a role, where they must sort of have faith that what is being built is green. There's a lot of greenwash around. There's been a lot of greenwash in the past, and I think banks have probably and financial institutes have burnt their fingers where they put their sort of something behind something that was supposed to be green and it wasn't. So I think it really it's a bit of hand holding, lots and lots of education. We spoke about educating APs. We also need to educate people outside of our space so that they understand what is green. This is not greenwash. Yes, you can give us some kind of green loan or a green discount.
Yeah, interesting. Ted, anything from your side in Kenya? Any idea why you think financial institutions are not leading this market?
I think I want to defend them and say I give them a year. And this year, actually, I think for sure you'll see a lot more. We've spoken to some of the banks. Absa Bank is our premium member at the Kenya Green Building Society, so they support the work that we do. And of course, we've seen where we've come and where we've worked with them. As Lisa said, hand-holding. Advocacy takes time. It takes time to also put in policies in place to understand why. What is the definition of green? I think one of the key things that we realize in society is that for a long time we don't have a Kenya Bureau of Standards definition of green. So as you approach the financial institution and to avoid what Lisa talked about, greenwashing, we are working with policy and the government to come up with a standard definition of green. That way, it's also easy for the banks to know that this is actually a standard definition of green, because then what is green, right? So I'd say a lot more is coming into the market very soon here in Kenya. I speak to a lot of financial institutions gearing up, so very soon.
Good to hear. All right, so from Ghana.
Yeah, for my final words, I would just like to make some comments On the report itself, for me, the report presents a certain reality. As to whether the reality is 50 or 70% reality, I cannot immediately tell. The reason I'm saying this is that it reflects a certain reality. The data, in as much as is a very useful tool, can only reveal so much, offer a window to a certain level of activity. So you know what they say, it's suggestive, data is suggestive, but also does not reveal certain happenings. The picture painted of the Ghanaian market is one that is nascent, growing at a slow rate, and while that is the reality, there are other issues of potential, for instance, that the report doesn't reveal. The report won't reveal, for instance, the number of people that call me or express their desire or have told me they're going green, the number of big green buildings, and I'm saying green buildings in code because I know there's a running argument. It's interesting that we're having this earlier in the morning, and at different times we've had a conversation as to whether you can label a building green if it's not been certified. But the thing is that I've personally visited certain buildings, some even living off grid. And there's a growing list of such properties who have not taken up certification yet. The question then is there a funnel that we can capture such buildings, call them green ready buildings, whatever label we can give them? Because for me, what this presents is that we have potentially a funnel of potentially certifiable projects, and then it would also be able to tell the story and paint the picture better that beyond using certifications as a marker, this is what's happening. So that when we have this data, for me, that also presents even another opportunity in there, because then you can even run them through the Edge app, so that beyond an opinion that is a green building, at least there's what I would say is at least some basic, they would have gone through a basic assessment to even be labeled green ready or whatever. And then once you have the funnel or the list of such buildings, you can even encourage and guide them to even get certification. The point I'm trying to make is that there are other layers of the conversation beyond certification. So I think going into the future, this is a key area that can be considered for future reports. Thank you.
Great. That's very interesting. In fact, before we go, just one more question that just came in. So let me just read that out and then see who would want to take it up. So it says, this coming from Lenso Pagiwa. It says, as all countries have seen the largest growth in retail and commercial, would you say there is a need to help more fragile developers such as social housing developers whose bottom line is sensitive? I think what the question is trying to point out is it's like there's been a growth in retail and commercial, but then for social housing, is there any way that they could also be helped to become green? Who would want to take this up? Lisa, Ted, Cyril, who?
Yeah, I think I could take it up in the case that, especially for Kenya, affordable housing has been decreed to abide to the EDGE standard. If you look at the current building code draft, clearly, I don't know what the case is for Ghana and South Africa, but for Kenya, it'll apply mostly to the formal built environment. And so this is a fraction of the development that occurs in the country. So in its nature, rural and informal settlements, are supposed to be sustainable because they're not connected to roads, they're not connected to, infrastructure, not connected to the sewer system. And so if you have, for example, social housing that's way off grid, then if you don't build it green, it'll be more expensive, because then you have to, keep calling the waste truck to come in and empty the sewer after so many years. If you're looking at it even from a financial perspective, this current, the high operational cost of maintaining such a building, is so. In short, my answer is yes, I agree with that opinion that more capacity building needs to be done for developers, especially doing social housing, because if you're going to call it social housing and affordable housing, then it has to be green. I mean, there is no two ways around that.
Okay, that's interesting. I think we are running behind time, so let me I'll just summarize what we've heard from you so far. And one of the key things that's standing out is that you are seeing FIs now certifying their buildings, and it's not just in Kenya, but then you're seeing that in Ghana as well. ESG has become one of the key considerations for investors. I mean, they are now asking questions, which is now pushing clients to actually get their project certified, right? And then for Ghana, we are seeing green building guidelines. For Kenya, the KGBS is working on green building guidelines for counties, which is also now going to help push the green building market in Kenya. And it was very interesting. Lisa mentioned earlier on that 2021, even at the height of COVID, saw the highest number of certifications. And we explained, we tried to delve into that, and we realized that maybe it's because the investors are asking a lot more questions. They are now being much more careful as to where to put their money, right? And we also spoke about the next 5 years, and in general, what we're seeing amongst all the three countries is that you see the next 5 years to show a lot more pipeline when it comes to green building. We'll see lots more projects going green. It's also possible to see some sort of incentives from government and from financial institutions being available in these markets. All right, and in South Africa, yes, the discussion on net zero would become very key in the next 5 years. We intend to see a lot more focus on green jobs, right? So I would hand over to Sandro for him to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and thank you very much, Lisa, Ned, and Cyril. I think this has been very useful. As I mentioned at the beginning, the reports represented the picture as 2020, and as Cyril pointed out, in particular, I guess in Ghana and Kenya, the picture has changed a lot already. So I think that this discussion has been very, very useful to reflect on the main developments so far. I'm sure that if we updated the reports right now, they would be different, and that when we go back in a couple of years and have another update, we'll have many developments, and the picture we painted will have changed. And it has been very useful to have some suggestions to, for example, look at more aspects of the market, looking at affordable housing in the future. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing these conversations, and also to us, as many times we do bring other stakeholders such as financial institutions. But thank you so much to Lisa, Ned, and Cyril for this great panel discussion, and also for the audience to connecting. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties towards the middle of the seminar, but we hope that you have enjoyed the discussion. And again, thank you very much for your attendance. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
And
Thank you. Bye.
Sorry,
Thank you.
just before we go, we would share a feedback survey to everybody that attended. Just take a few minutes to complete it for us. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.